So just, I'm going to ask you both briefly to tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now. You're about to graduate in computer science. Tell us a little bit about your journey, Karla.
Yeah, about 3 years ago I came out as transgender and life got a lot more interesting, but unfortunately a lot more difficult. Just new challenges faced me in kind of everywhere I went. But luckily there have been people who have helped me through those challenges, and I've found new communities to get me through them and who have dealt with them before me and who will deal with them after me. I've had to take a kind of extended route through college just based on my mental health and the challenges that have come with that. But I've found avenues that have wielded great prosperity to me outside of college. So I'm in my 6th year now. It's my 3rd final year. But I'm really looking forward to just kind of getting that chapter done and to get out working properly. Because I found in the last year that trying to get hired as a minority without a degree is quite a challenge. I was talking with a recruiter recently, a friend of my dad's, and I was wondering, you know, why all my job applications were falling through, and I kind of went through it with her, and she said everything was fine about it, but sometimes recruiters already have enough LGBT in their company. And I was like, I couldn't believe that if we became a majority, we're going to take over.
Like.
Yeah.
They say that about LGBT. I wonder if they dare to also say that about black women.
It's astounding. Like, I'm sure it was said, 40, 50 years ago. People say we've got 2, that's fine. The token black stereotype. Yeah, I couldn't believe that it was like, you're fine for the job, but we don't want to gay up the place too much. Which I just thought,
So I'm laughing. It's not funny, but
I mean, you kind of have to laugh.
You'd cry otherwise.
So at that point I realized I need to get my degree and make sure they have no reason not to hire me. Yeah. But as Heather has said, there are new avenues popping up, and there are people who would be much happier to hire me now because of my minority status and what I can bring to the table because of that.
But it would be nice to get to a place where you will be hired, because, I mean, I happen to know you, and I know you're a very brilliant person, even if it is taking you 6 years to finish.
Yeah.
I happen to know, I've seen your writing, and you know what I mean?
I'm a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Make sure I get it right. So yeah, that's where I am now. I've just submitted my interim thesis report last month. I'm designing an online tabletop game for my thesis, and I hope to graduate. I will graduate in September.
Yeah, you definitely will. We'll pick up some of what you said there, but I want Ciara-Beth to introduce and tell us a little bit about what led to my contact.
So I'm Ciara-Beth, I'm 19 years old, and I'm on a mission to prove to the rest of the world that autism doesn't define a person. I received my diagnosis at 14 years old, which is considered a late diagnosis, but I consider it an on-time diagnosis. I think if I had gotten it any earlier, it's very possible that I would have become kind of less inclined to develop coping mechanisms that worked for me. For other people it's different, but for me it came at the right time. I needed it when it came, but any earlier would have been wrong and any later would have been wrong. So at 14 years old, I was given this diagnosis of autism, and I went home and I had an identity crisis, because autism is one of these disorders that comes with a very, very, very long list of symptoms. And it's also one of those things that Dr. Google will diagnose you with if you're a regular human being and you're just reading checklists off the internet. So it's I found it very, very difficult to distinguish what parts of Ciara-Beth were Ciara-Beth and what parts were autism. So I did what any 14-year-old would do, and I read every single academic journal article that I could find and came across some fairly alarming statistics that at the time it was 90% of people with autism are unemployed. I think it's currently around the 85% mark, but still too high, where 77% approximately, give or take, said in a survey that if they were offered a job, they'd take it in a heartbeat. So you've got all of these people that want to work, and you've got all of these people who can't or aren't allowed to work because someone has decided in an office somewhere that they're not suited to their work environment. So I did a bit more reading and then came across a statistic that 68% of employers feel it's a mistake if you don't make eye contact in a job interview, which is a very, very common symptom for autism. Is it's uncomfortable for us to look you in the eye or look at your face. And it doesn't mean we're being inattentive and we're not trying to be rude. It's just physically uncomfortable, so we don't do it. So I decided I didn't like any of these statistics, and there wasn't a chair at the table for me, so I decided I was going to drag my own chair in and make a space for me. So I did this in the form of an app, which at the start of, I was the shyest, most quiet human being on the planet. I spoke to my parents. There was one teacher in school I talked to. I was in a class of 20 and I would not answer a question in class. There were a couple of times that a teacher would ask me to answer a question and I'd have a panic attack in the middle of the classroom and have to be brought out. And then did my contact and competed in the Young Scientist 2 years ago and did quite well there. And now I talk like this for a living. So there's been a bit of a... So in essence, no one can shut me up. But no, it's been a very interesting journey, and obviously kind of a lot of people hear the word autism and they panic for some reason because they typically think worst case scenario, because that's what humans are almost conditioned to do, is it's how bad is it as opposed to what does it allow you to do. So they're kind of, I used to think of all the things that autism wouldn't let me do, and it came up there kind of 2 or 3 days ago that someone was asking me, oh, well, how does it impact on you? And I started talking about it like I always do, that, you know, oh, well, it's fantastic because it means that I know exactly how to set up myself for success. I know I need my routine. I know I need to be clear that when I don't understand something. And they go, no, 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 no. Like, how does it impact you? And I realized they wanted me to talk about all of the ways that autism makes life difficult, and it does. But I'm not always equipped to talk about that because I actually don't know any different.
Really, really interesting, Karla. I think you're going to have competition for the standing ovation when Ciara-Beth speaks in May. But
Standing backstage.
but it's a fascinating story, Ciara-Beth. Will you explain a little bit more just about what My Contact does?
So My Contact is an app that it has a photo of a person's face on the screen, and inside the person's eyes there are 2 shapes, the same shape in each eye. And across the bottom of the screen there are 4 buttons. And it's very simply just to match the shapes. And the idea behind it is that while someone is so focused on matching the shapes, they're being subconsciously desensitized to looking at a person's face and eyes.
It's quite brilliant. The simplicity of it, I absolutely adore that app. I think it's quite brilliant. As somebody who grew up absolutely, you know, with paralyzing shyness, it would have been really useful for me in my own youth. But Heather, first time you've met the 2 gals, they're both amazing. I often think neurodiversity gets a little bit left out when people are talking about diversity and inclusion.
So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, how many people in the audience are thinking, how do we hire these people? Right? And then I'm starting to think, how many more people do we have outside that are talented like these 2 young ladies that are walking around, but for somewhere along the culture in our organisation doesn't allow that individual to come through. And I think that's the real driving force that we need to discuss in the room today. How do we as leaders create cultures that we can encourage the talent, such as these 2 amazing young women, to come through in our organisations, because we're going to need them, right? If you can have someone develop an app because, you know, there's something lacking in the basic communication skills that we have, and I hope you're making money out of it. I hope you've patented it, right? Do you need a lawyer?
You actually can't patent an app. That's the
You
funny
can't?
thing.
Oh, we'll
No.
find a way to do something so that nobody else goes off with it. But these are the people that we need as we try to become successful organisations. Technology is driving the way forward. A&I is driving the way that business operate now. And so it's the best that get to the table first that are successful. Those that are thinking about, shall I hire that person or not? Will they fit in? Or we have enough gays, or we have enough black people in our organisation, or we've got far too many women, we don't want any more. Actually, you're limiting the talent walking through your door, which ultimately means that the success of your organisation, at the end of the day, means this, money, right? And I think that's how you've got to kind of really think about this. And for me, it's always about diversity and the business case of creating an inclusive organisation.
Yeah, and we haven't really talked much about the business case. I'm hoping people here have read all the figures and know the business case is there and proven, and all the research is out there. Whose research shows that, is it ethnically diverse companies? You know the stats, I'd say.
That have got a diverse group of people that are thinking are seen to be that much more successful because you don't have group think. It's, you know, when you're at school, you get all the little girls together, we all sit there with our same colour hair ribbons, and we like the same things. We all like David Cassidy, and we like this and we like that. But actually, what you need is somebody to come in who says, actually, no, I like Prince, or I like this person. Then you have a different conversation, and that's just a jovial way of saying it. But actually, what we want to do around those boardroom tables is create, you know, an opportunity where you can have diverse thought and discussions, because ultimately, that's what we need to survive outside. We need to have diversity of thought.
And I often worry that, you know, that it's often through sort of fear and ignorance. You know, you mentioned the fear around autism, which I think is a really good point, you know, because there's always negative stories you hear instead of, you know, all the fantastic stories of how people often who happen to have autism happen to be very good at coding and things like that, you know, it's because of the focus. I'm just thinking yourself, Karla, do you think there is a certain amount of fear and ignorance, you know, when you're talking to people? Like, I mean, I have to confess, like, I've learned so much from you over the few years that we know each other. I'm thinking people like Sinead Burke is a good friend of mine who happens to be a little person. I remember the first time I met Sinead Burke, you know, saying to her, you know, having to just be really honest, like you were talking about this, Heather, earlier, and just asking her, do you want me to lean down or do you want me to sit down to speak? You know, which do you prefer? I just think that we have to be braver maybe about asking people who happen to have autism, happen to be transgender, happen to be people of colour, or whatever it may be, to actually be franker about asking the questions. What do you think, Karla?
Yeah, with Sinead particularly, the first time I met her, or when I was saying goodbye to her, she very frankly was like, "You're going to have to lean down to hug me goodbye," which I thought was great because it just cleared my.
She's brilliant.
But I think we need to kind of trust the people within these minorities to be able to distinguish kind of good and bad faith. So if someone you know comes up and asks me a question that might be good intentioned but maybe ill-worded or ill-phrased, I think it's fair to give these people a modicum of trust and just say, you know, like, and that not everyone's going to freak out. And we do tend to know, like I've gotten every question now about 50 times, and I tend to know when it's coming from a place of love and respect and wanting to do better, and when it comes from, I'm curious because I deserve to know about you. But yeah, the fear is like, it's really set in. I resonated with what Ciara-Beth said because my parents were aware of my Asperger's diagnosis from when I was about 4. And I think they told me when I was about 12 or 13, which, as she says, is very much kind of on time. I don't think it would have done me any favors to know as a 6-year-old that, like, this is everything that you would need to be.
Absolutely.
They just allowed me, you know, to attend my closest school among people of all neurodiversities, and it helped me rather than putting myself into a box before my brain had even kind of formed.
And I'm just wondering what you guys think. You know, I find a lot of organizations are, you know, trying to work very hard to you know, it's not always easy to turn around the Titanic if your organization isn't very diverse, even people with very good intentions. I mean, how do we help those organizations to, you know, who are actually trying to change in good faith? I mean, personally, I think it would be really useful, you know, if you're getting in speakers internally for events, that they would get the likes of you or Ciara-Beth, you know, it's almost like that idea of reverse mentoring, you know, where you're actually listening to the people coming up who are maybe a little bit different to you? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
So I've got the most amazing job now, and that means I will decide when we've got panels and we've got events, we're doing corporate hospitality, I want to see who's coming, I want to see who the audience is, I want to know who's accepted, I want to know who the speakers are, all of that. So it's a great opportunity for us to put that on the table. And if I'm really honest, people are thinking, I didn't think of that, because it's not done intentionally. It's just you go to the same place all the time for the same people, so you get the same results. Now, organisations are doing a lot to really address this. All of the leaders are doing a lot. But do you know who are not probably doing you much favour? The headhunters that you go to. Because the headhunters are lazy. They will just go to the same places and look for the same people, and then they'll say, well, we couldn't find you anyone. But where I'm seeing organisations, and there's a whole mix of organisations that are getting creative and bold and saying, right, Mr. Headhunter or Mrs. Headhunter, if you don't find us a diverse pool of talent, we're not going to use you anymore. And once again, that's the commercial side of it. So when I've been in rooms where people have said, well, we don't really know to go and find the BME talent, I'll go, have you looked on the power list? There is 100 of the country's most influential black people running all kinds of big organisations, doing all kinds of things in all organisations. So that's your starting point.
Is that
right?
not the first place you'd look?
Right, and actually, so there are things like that, you know, you go on LinkedIn, you go on Google, type in what you're looking for. You know, in terms of, if you know, when you're setting up a business, and so often I see this with entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, when they set up a business, they're actually thinking, we need to have a diverse pool of talent on here. Because if we want to get investment, our investors are asking for that. If we think about the clients that we want to serve out there, they're saying, actually, we really do need to make sure that we're diverse. And, you know, this is a story some of you may know, so I won't mention the name of a big US bank many years ago that they went to the States to do a big presentation, and they had the right team, and they got into the room, and when they got there, they realised that they weren't going anywhere, because the people in the room was a mix of different people that sat there, and they realised it was all men, suited and booted in their 40s, all ready to do this big pitch, and they said no. And this is happening more and more, where organisations are saying, I mean, even your own organisations through procurement will be saying, actually, and this is something that we can do that's a starting point, let's look at some of the smaller businesses, let's look at some of the dynamic businesses that are out there. And it's actually just doing something a bit more than the usual, you know, and I think that's what creates, and that, you know, entrepreneurs are the lifeblood of the economy, right? But through those entrepreneurs, sometimes are disenfranchised employees that have worked at big corporates who think, actually, there's no space for me. And then what happens is they go and set up their own businesses, and they quite rightly go and work with your competitors because they remember the journey they've had. So for me, it's really about harnessing the talent, the opportunities, but also thinking about, actually, what does the future look like for us?
Unfortunately, this is the problem with lunch events. I know a lot of you have to be somewhere, so we're going to have to wrap it up there. I mean, I think if one thing we have learned is maybe within your own organisations to maybe give platforms to people that you would like to know more about, or maybe you'd like to know more about their background or how they might actually add to your organisation, because every organisation benefits from having difference within it. Some of these people will be with us back at Inspirefest in May, and you'll get to hear them properly, because I know it was very brief there. We'd love to see you there. Please think of one thing if you're coming as a leader. I was at an event recently that somebody ran where I was invited, but I had to bring somebody with me who I sponsor or mentor, or I'm trying to bring, along up with me. And everybody did the same, and I just thought it was quite brilliant. So the next time you're going to something, or if you're coming to Inspirefest, bring somebody with you who would not expect necessarily for you to invite them, rather than just bringing another leader. And please bring your teams. We'll be sending out a mailer with discounts for anybody who attended today and things like that. We do hope to see you there. We like to think we're about 5 years ahead of the conversation on diversity at Inspirefest. We really are, we have to get past this idea that diversity is about women. That's not what diversity is about, and it's definitely not about pink, even though there's a little bit of pink up there, sorry. So please come along. Please try and go away and think about some of the things we discussed today, and maybe make those changes within your own organisations if you can. We'll end up with a much better world, much better technology, much better science, and just a much better life in general. So thanks a million, everybody, for taking the time to be here today. And thank you so much to our fabulous speakers.